Hi guys, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of The Fighter in the Family. I believe the last video I left off just the last page of chapter 8. So I'm going to just finish up chapter 8 and then continue to chapter 9. Okay, The Fighter in the Family. So this is the last page of chapter 8. The nurses, they would know. They were the ones who had made friends with the little 10-year-old girl suffering from that incurable disease, and they had had a party for her in April, thinking that she would not make it until her next birthday in August. But a miracle happened, and the girl received a donor. And everyone said that finally she might be able to lead a normal life. Then, 2 days before she was released, the girl fell from her bed, developed an internal infection, and died. The nurses on that ward did not eat or sleep or smile for a good many days. So why should Nathaniel not tell the parents to prepare for the worst? Was it better to let them prepare for the best and have their hearts broken? Whenever Tensi was on the ward, Nathaniel would hover about the doctors and ask them to tell him frankly, "So, how long do you figure she has, Doc?" And though the doctors reassured him that she was coming along fine, Nathaniel did not believe it. One night, while on the graveyard shift, Nathaniel was walking down the corridor, coming from his break, when a woman stopped him. "Did you see them?" she asked frantically. "See who?" asked Nathaniel. "The two little boys. Did you see them?" She was shaking, looking around her. "I swear, two little boys went into that bathroom, and I stood outside waiting for them to come out. I waited for 10 minutes. Then another lady came and wanted to use the bathroom and asked me what I was waiting for. It was then that we opened the bathroom door, and the two little boys were not in there. I swear I saw them enter." She desperately wanted someone to believe her. "They do that sometimes," explained Nathaniel without flinching. "Poor children, they don't realize that they are dead. They walk about the place sometimes thinking they are still alive." The woman was terrified. The hospital was the place for such encounters, and Nathaniel had heard his share of stories from ancillary workers, nurses, parents, and police officers stationed at the hospital. There was also the possibility that the woman was extremely exhausted and had been hallucinating. That too had happened often enough in a place such as this. She had been camping out by the bedside of her daughter who was awaiting surgery. Exhaustion. It can cause you to see things that aren't really there. So that is the end of chapter 8. So now we're going to continue on chapter 9. "Didn't you hear them say that the child might die, and even if she doesn't, she will grow to be an idiot?" Nathaniel asked his wife. "What do you want to bother to send her to school for?" But Tulsi still enrolled Tensi into basic school and made her a neat little uniform and did her hair up real nice for the first day with bubbles and ribbons and a bandeau. She got carried away. Tensi was 3 years old. Had the teacher not been told that Tensi was mildly mentally retarded and given a list of all the things that the child should and should not do, she never would have guessed. Except that there was some amount of stiffness in her limbs and she had a tendency to giggle for a bit longer than the other children had stopped being amused. Tansy did everything on par with the others. In fact, there were certain things in which she excelled, and there were some who would have said that she was a gifted child. She started reading at 3, and that was the same year she stopped speaking. Everyone thought that Tansy had become dumb, but as she did her lessons well and passed her written tests, the teacher encouraged them to let her stay in school. They took her to several specialists in the government hospitals and hearing and speech centers, and nobody could find any physical thing wrong with the child's ears or her vocal passage. So they assumed that it was the brain damage that was taking its toll. Tansy was too young to realize consciously why she had decided to stop speaking, but really it was because whenever she had said something to him, her grandfather had told her that she was an idiot. Tansy could not figure what an idiot was, but it did not sound as if it was something good, and that was all that really mattered. As young as she was, she knew she did not want to be an idiot, so she kept quiet. She did not want to make her grandfather angry, but it seemed it was very easy for him to become angry. It was the strangest thing, but Tansy was more drawn to Nathaniel than to anybody else in that house. She trailed behind him like his shadow, but she remained as silent as ever. Nathaniel could not imagine what could have inspired such affection in Tansy. He had not done or said anything to encourage it. In fact, he had always been harsh and critical of the little girl, and very verbally so. He had not been very discreet in his opinion that it was a shame to allow such a child to grow up when she was an idiot who could not be expected to adjust to society in a normal way. Hence, friends would tease and bully her at school. No man would want her except to use her, and she would not have a family or any fulfillments in life, so what was the point? And Nathaniel had been very candid when he had said that Hortense should not bother to read to Tansy, for she would not be able to make head or tail of it all. How surprised they had been when Tansy came home and read 2 whole passages in fine print in less than 5 minutes, and she was only 3. Nathaniel had almost decided to become hopeful about life, but when suddenly Tansy stopped speaking, and therefore stopped reading, out loud at least, Nathaniel was relieved. He was confident once more that he had been on the right track. Tansy liked her grandmother's company too. Her grandmother was soft and fluffy and smiled a lot and sang as she sewed. As Tansy grew, one constant joy was sitting by her grandmother's side, sitting by her grandmother's feet and watching the pedals sink up and down, and listening to the rugged melody of Hortense's deep, untrained voice. Tansy loved to stroke the long, bright, delicate strips of raffia. No one had taught her how to embroider the patterns. She simply took up the needle one day and went right to sewing, for she had been observing all along. Agatha had grown up somewhat and tried her hand at business school, but she did not receive the support of her husband. There are some women for whom it is quite a fortunate thing to be blessed with a spouse who is of a much older age, from whom she can learn much and on whose experienced shoulders she can rest. And there are some women for whom it is rather unfortunate to have been shackled to this man, old enough to be her father, but financially on the same level as her brother, and emotionally infantile. With such a man, a young woman cannot expect to go in any direction but down, no matter how life had shaken her out of her own girlish stupor, and no matter how much she tried to rise. Tenzi grew up with the notion that Agatha was her sister, and that Hortense was her mother, and that the fellow who was called Stickapin, who smelled of rum and who slurred his words, was some lunatic from off the streets to whom her family had volunteered to offer dinner in the evenings. Nobody told her this was so, but it seemed very logical that this was indeed so. Nathaniel had a friend named Clarence who lived in Cassava Peace, but closer to Hilda's side, whom Nathaniel had known for years, but their friendship had really only kicked off in recent months, since Clarence became ill. Nathaniel had a long-standing policy which dictated that he did not go into people's houses unless it was absolutely necessary. But this odd friendship with Clarence, who himself was an odd man, had blossomed so quickly and so deeply that the two of them were like Batty and Bench, and so Nathaniel decided that he would visit Clarence. Because she was Nathaniel's shadow and was always following him around, Tensi stuck to him that day like a leech, and so ended up in Clarence's house too. She had been 6 years old then and was in her first year of primary school, but was still not speaking. Clarence lived with his wife, son, daughter, and grandson, and he was a man as weird as they came. He was grumpy and grouchy, and feisty and quarrelsome, and he and Nathaniel got on just fine. In Clarence's room, because his wife wouldn't allow them anywhere else in the house, he had a collection of old things which he was keeping, hoping to be able to auction them one day and become rich. There were old coins, a coal iron, old-time lamps, radios, and all manner of collectibles. Tensi went speedily over to them and began admiring the pieces, turning them over in her hands. She was the only child who would have been allowed to come within breathing range of the treasured items, for Clarence had developed a soft spot for the girl. "Your granddaughter is growing fast, Natty," he said, limping and aching, for he was not feeling well. Clarence's daughter had given him the wrong medication at the wrong time, and an overdose at that, and it had thrown him into a fit when he realized that morning, saying that all his efforts in sending his daughter to school had been in vain. The daughter in question was 30 years old and the mother of Clarence's grandson. Clarence said he did not know why he relied on that daughter of his to administer his medication when it was obvious she wanted to kill him for some reason. "Tensi is growing in body, but her mind stagnant," Nathaniel said, not caring whether the girl was hearing or not. "You know already that she cannot speak. Maybe she will stop walking next. Then she won't be able to use the bathroom by herself. And of course you know that after that, death will not be far off. We'll soon have to make funeral arrangements." Clarence sailed his walking stick at Nathaniel, but it missed as usual. He figured the overdose has blurred his vision and was affecting his aim. "Why do you always have to be so blasted negative, you ugly brute, Nathaniel Hector?" Clarence shouted. He would have thrown in some expletives, but he did not want to injure the ears of the young. "Why do you always think that somebody is going to die? When you work in a hospital, you see death every day, so you come to realize it is the one sure thing to be expected," Nathaniel said, handing Clarence the walking stick for which he had been reaching. But you see life too, Clarence argued. You see life even more than death. Don't you see more people getting better all the time and going home hearty and strong, even more than those who die? Nathaniel thought about it. It was true, generally, but there was something that Clarence did not understand. Mr. Spiteful only let people live so he could suffer them some more, or to trick them into hoping. Then he would really strike. Take your granddaughter, for instance, Clarence continued. Didn't you say that when she was born, everybody had just given up? And look now how well she is. Well, asked Nathaniel. Well, she used to talk and now she's dumb. Seems like a downward trend to me. You'll soon hear that she's blind. Children go through all kinds of stages, Clarence said, and when they are ready, they snap right out of it. So tell me, what stage is Dean going through right now? Nathaniel asked bitterly, with a deliberate stress on the word Dean, the way you do when you know you will hit a nerve. This was a punch below the belt, and of a sick man at that. It was quite uncalled for. He knew Clarence did not like to hear mention of his teenage son Dean, who had been a member of Turnip's gang. I can't put anything in the fridge and that boy doesn't eat it out, Clarence said, forgetting that he had been discussing Tensie and her progress. He and some youths robbed Ivy's shop the other day, and the boy so fool that when the police started chasing them, he ran right into this house in my room. In my room. Damn fool. Tell me if that boy ain't a blasted idiot. It's enough to make a man swallow his mouthwash. That was Clarence's favorite expression, though he never ever used mouthwash. Then, seeming to remember something suddenly, Clarence leaned forward and whispered, Natty, listen to this. They say they can go ahead with the transfusion. The tests come back and the boy's blood matched mine. Clarence needed a donor and Dean had been found to be the perfect candidate. That's good news then, Nathaniel said. Good news, my back foot, Clarence exclaimed. I don't want that boy's blood in my body. Who knows what kind of evil they will pump into me? He's your son. His blood is already in your body, Clarence. No, Clarence pointed out. My blood is in his body, but I don't want his blood in my body. Clarence had reasoned that there must be a crucial difference. Faye's blood didn't match, and it's just as well, because that woman has so much vengeance in her heart for me, her blood would surely kill me. Did you know that she gave me the wrong medication again, and an overdose this time? It's just because she knows I can't read. She just got the labels mixed up, Nathaniel offered. It happens sometimes at the hospital. Then Nathaniel said, So since you're refusing the blood, I suppose you've made up your mind to die then. You might as well make your peace with the man up top. It doesn't seem you'll last much longer. Clarence said that Nathaniel should stop talking rubbish because he was only 57 and had at least 20 more good solid years left. In proof of this, Clarence flexed his arm muscle, which sagged like a balloon that had a little water in it. Nathaniel ignored this. He had decided in his mind that Clarence would soon die. Clarence, when you get to Shut-Eye Country, tell that man up there that I'm onto him. I've been onto him for a long time. Shut-Eye Country was the name Nathaniel had given to the place that people went when they died. Mr. Spiteful either lived in Shut-Eye Country or used it as a sort of holiday home. But in any case, Mr. Spiteful owned Shut-Eye Country as he owned everywhere else in this world and the next, and was sure to have a list of the arrivants. I will not be going to shut eye country. Not now and not anytime soon, Clarence shouted. And I will not allow them to pump that boy's blood into my body. Nathaniel could already picture Clarence's coffin being lowered into the ground. The funeral would take place on a rainy day, and people would say that Clarence was crying, not wanting to go. Nathaniel wondered which suit Clarence would want him to bury him in. Then he remembered that the old coot had but one suit, which he wore to every function. Damn pauper. Just then, Faye brought Jasper into the room. He was 6 months old, and Clarence figured it was time the boy was walking. He also figured it was high time that the boy closed up that soft spot at the top of his head, which was so inconvenient whenever Clarence wanted to rub his grandchild's head. The soft spot felt too vulnerable, as if Clarence's fingers would easily sink in. Look at him, Natty. Isn't he the ugliest thing? Clarence asked, kissing Jasper's forehead. In our day, babies were never so ugly. Nathaniel agreed. Faye came in again, this time with a bottle full of formula, and told Clarence to feed the baby. Jasper kicked his feet in the air, recognizing his bottle. Look at this ugly little wretch, Clarence said miserably, kissing the baby's feet and trying to tickle him. Jasper wailed for the bottle, and Clarence held the bottle high into the air, far from the baby's mouth. Clarence was not going to be bullied by someone who still had a hole at the top of his head. Just then, Tensie walked over and gently took the bottle from Clarence and started to feed Jasper. She's such a sweet child, Clarence said. Can you hear what I am saying, child? Tensie did not answer and kept feeding the baby. Can she hear what I'm saying, Natty? Clarence asked Nathaniel. Didn't you hear me say the child is an idiot? Nathaniel shouted. She cannot speak and she cannot hear you either. But don't they say that she's doing well at school? How can she do well if she doesn't hear what the teacher says? Honestly, Nathaniel had not thought of that before, but then he reflected and finally said, she reads a lot. Oh, said Clarence. But I expect she'll be blind soon, Nathaniel added quickly. It's only a matter of time. Tensie did read a lot. She found that the written words were much nicer than the ones that people spoke, especially her grandfather. She retreated to a world inside her head, her headquarters, so to speak, from where she observed the world but did not dare offer any verbal commentary on it. From a distance, Nathaniel observed Tensie reading. He loved the child. Nathaniel wondered what sinister plan Mr. Spiteful had in making the child love to read so much. Was this how the blindness was to come? He knew the man always had some hidden agenda, and that it was only a matter of time before his true intentions were revealed. Nathaniel looked at Tensie's bright black eyes, which pulled information into them like black holes in space. He considered her inquisitive stare, her gentle touch, her pretty smile. He looked at her slightly stiff legs and the way her elbows stuck out and bended slightly away from her body. Leave it to Mr. Spiteful to ruin a bright young girl's future, Nathaniel thought. Nathaniel had always thought about grandchildren, what they would be like. As a young man, he had imagined that when he grew older and had children of his own, and they bore him grandchildren, he would hear the little feet scampering through the house and hear their joyful screams bouncing off the walls and hitting him sweetly, smack on the heart. Nathaniel had imagined that the children would flock at his feet, and one by one he would pat their heads as they glanced up reverently. Then the appointed time would come for the issuing of candy and chocolate, though, he imagined even then, Hortense would have laid down strict regulations regarding the handing out of sweets, and would probably be chastising him about ruining the children's teeth. But Nathaniel imagined that, like any self-respecting grandfather, He would defy those regulations, and he would dip into his pockets and come up with candy of every color and description and parcel them out to the tiny anxious hands. Hortense would curse him that he was spoiling the grandchildren, but he wouldn't care. In the fantasy, there had been sessions of storytelling, whereby Nathaniel would tell his progeny of the stories his own grandfather had told him in days of yore. Duppy stories, Anansi stories, and Aesop stories. There would be jockeyback riding, dancing, and all sorts of things that Nathaniel should have done, would have done, had Mr. Spiteful not stepped in and ruined the whole thing, ruined the whole damn thing. Juju would have been 26 years old right now. He would have already graduated from the agricultural school and given Nathaniel his first set of grandchildren. And the stories and the rides and the clandestine sweetie distribution would have already been well underway. One person he knew was Mr. Spiteful's sidekick, was his sister, Hilda, who was always meddling in Nathaniel's business, though he had told her time and time again to go find a family of her own. Auntie Hilda had taken the liberty of teaching Tensi to dance, though Nathaniel had told her that the child was an invalid and could not dance. You ruined a healthy child, now you want to go ruin an invalid, Nathaniel said, referring to Galvani and Tensi. She is already blighted. Leave her alone. Don't tell me who to leave alone, Hilda shot back. You are the one who is always calling her names. You should leave the child alone. She's better off without you. You are too damn miserable. Don't know why she stick to you so. Better to be miserable with your own children than to be miserable and not have children of your own, Nathaniel rebutted. If your father had not abused me, I would have children of my own. He destroyed my womb, that's why I can't bear children of my own, Hilda responded loudly, not caring who else was listening. You are looking for somebody to blame your problems on, said Nathaniel. Blame yourself for your own problems, harlot. You blame yourself for your own problems, Hilda replied, ignoring the accusation of her being a harlot. She had grown immune and hardened against such utterings. Stop blaming God for what you did to Juju. You gave Juju that guinea. You killed Juju. You should be in jail. Stop blaming God. God gave you sense to know that you should not give a 3-year-old boy guineas. Shut up, Hilda. Shut up, Nathaniel shouted, squeezing his hands over his ears like a little boy. Shut up. Okay then, that's the end of chapter 9. That's the end of chapter 9. So Hilda has hit a nerve there. Hilda has hit a nerve on Nathaniel right there. Okay guys, so we're going to continue in the next video with chapter 10. So please come back and join us. And this is Zande and Kim saying goodbye for now. Come back in the next video.